Hello everybody. In this video, we are going to be talking about the FIDE candidates that finished about less than a month ago. So, obviously, I'm sure as we all know, Nepomniachtchi was the winner of the tournament. So we're going to look at his games in a series of videos. So this is his first game against ANISH GIRI. But before that, let's have a quick look at where the tournament was and basic details about the tournament. Okay, so obviously the candidates was held to figure out who would be the best challenger for Magnus Carlsen, and which is going to take place later this year in November 2021. He won the tournament quite convincingly, in fact, and clinching before the end of the tournament. So it began on March 17. Well, the pre-tournament thing started on the 15th, but the actual game started on the 15th. As we can see here, arrivals, opening ceremony, and the game started on the 17th. So the first 7 rounds were played through 17th to 25th. However, due to the COVID-19 outbreak, the tournament was postponed till the start of this year. And so basically COVID hit and the tournament had to be stopped. Now whether this affected the players negatively or positively, well, that really depends on the situation, but depends on how you're doing in the tournament and how you were feeling about your chess play. And maybe a better chance to regroup and come back, or maybe it could have slightly annoyed you. Just depends on how you take it. But yes, Nepomniachtchi won the tournament quite convincingly. So, let's have a look at the first game. So this is ANISH GIRI versus Nepomniachtchi. So the first move is Knight f3, a classical Renjith opening. Knight f3, Knight f6 was played, so possible double fianchetto, and deviating into the English, c4. And Nepomniachtchi opted for a symmetrical English. White played Knight c3, Knight c6, continuing the symmetricalness. And now White opened in the center with d4. Okay, so Black took, White took back, and Black played e6. And this is turning into a similar Sicilian, especially if the move e4 was played. But g3, so ANISH opted for a more positional style of play. Queen b6, Knight b5, and now things are starting to get a bit crazy. Bishop e3 is in the air, Bishop c5 looks like a sensible move. There are many things that could potentially start to blow up. And Jan played Bishop Knight e5. Okay, so here Bishop e3 is a possibility. White played Bishop f4. Now for example, if Bishop e3, well, the problem is Black has Queen c6 currently. And what Black is saying is, if here, you're attacking the rook, and the rook has to play here or f3. But even f3 is big trouble after Black Knight takes e4, giving pressure on the bishop. And already Black is completely winning here. So you have to take your time and not rush. Played here. Now Queen c6 here doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, no sense at all, because you can take and then simply play check and pick up the rook. So you have to give it some time and thought to play the moves precisely when to and when not to. Okay, Black played Knight g4. Well, simple threat of Queen f2. And now a sensible move in e3, stopping the checkmate or possible checkmate threat and getting ready to possibly develop the bishop and get castle soon. Oh, oops. Okay, so Black played a6, asking the knight to move, a sensible move, and White tried to make things insane by giving an attack to the Black knight. And Black took, White took, Knight takes c4. So currently in this situation, black is up a pawn. So white played rook c1, so kind of ignoring the position, the pawn. Obviously in these positions there are many moves, like for example, you can just simply move the knight, but there's so many possibilities in the position. Like one may ask, what is wrong with queen b3? And in fact it's a perfectly fine move, threatening the pawn, threatening bishop takes. But maybe Anish was worried about, for example, d5 and black having control of the center. But rook c1 is a perfectly fine move, and in fact it's just creating more complications. And I would think both players were trying to win the tournament, so obviously they wanted complications. And black played d5, following the main principles of a game of chess and controlling the center. And white had set up a tiny little trap here, because knight takes b2, then queen b3 suddenly is not so fun for black. For example, knight c4, this is a free piece. And if something like queen c6, you can just sacrifice the rook, and suddenly black is in some trouble. So here, there are other moves, like, okay, knight a4, but once again, you can just take. And c8 bishop is unfortunately not defended, and the pin is also existing. So, back to the knight b2, and if black tries something like queen a5, the point is, if takes, well, this, I guess, gives black a good position. However, it is not necessary to take. And there are many other moves. In fact, just simply bishop b5. And suddenly this knight is in a world of trouble. Okay, but let's go back to the game. So Nepo didn't make that mistake, and he played d5. And black looks to be quite happy, in fact. Let's control the center. White's pieces are a bit clustered, all stuck on the back rank. b3, I guess, trying to kick the knight away. And now black went all out and sacked the piece, clearly showing that he's really out for blood. Takes rook a3, attacking. Rook e5, bishop e5, defending the knight. f6, asking the bishop to go away. Bishop d4, the only sensible move in the position, considering your bishop just went to e5. Queen a5, and now black starts to really pile up the pressure. Now here white makes an interesting decision. Something like this can be fatal because of e5. And suddenly your pieces are all tangled, and you're going to drop all your pieces. They're pretty much dropping like flies. He's going to take your bishop, then he's going to take your knight. So white was forced to sacrifice this piece. Black took with the bishop. White took back, and he took, and white played king f4. So obviously this is a possibility, but not a very enticing one because of all these pawns, and they're just going to steam down the board, and black is going to easily win. So white needed some sort of complication and to make the game interesting, and some potential chances for him to survive the game. So black pushed with b4, and white didn't slow down at all and played g5. Both sides seem to have their own attacks and ideas and possibilities. e5, asking a simple question to the bishop: where do you want to go? He took the rook. He took back. gf6, gf6, and queen b1. Now this is an interesting move. Obviously, if queen b1 first, f5. f5 is the idea. Takes, so it is takes, and queen b1. Once again, f5 is possible. However, in this case, there is some stuff with the rook, and c takes d5 as well. like there's rook h6, and it's more harder for black to untangle. For example, there is no rook h6 here. Okay, so he took gf6, gf6, and also cd5 is a free pawn. And something like this makes quite a bit of sense. Anyways, he played queen b1 first, and queen c7, and he played queen d3. Now, I'm not so sure that queen d3 is really necessary, in fact. And, okay, you can take... I guess this looks quite scary, but maybe... it's a possibility. So defending the c-pawn. But queen d3 seems to not work at all. Work the least because of something like queen c4. But he played b5, so once again complicating everything, just creating a massive mess, and takes. And somehow, according to the engine, this is around equal, but everything is flying around. Black has a huge majority, a huge pawn stack in his upper pawn, but his rook is stuck. And even though white's rook is stuck, he is applying pressure to the h pawn. But black's queen and bishop and all his pawns seem to be charging. So it's a quite double-edged situation. e4, a very common theme in breaking up the pawns. And black simply says, okay, I will take it. And Giri played rook h4, obviously trying to recover the pawn. But I don't think this is so necessary. I think just takes and try and get into an endgame would be the easiest way to try and draw. But I guess he still thought he has chances of winning. Bishop e6, and he took. Takes. Bishop c4. And king g7, obviously taking advantage of the pin. White played queen b3. Rook b8. Suddenly, all of black's pieces are alive. And he traded into this endgame. There might be a move like queen d3, but once again the piece will be hit. And for the obvious reason that bishop f5 is also twisted in the position. So queen b3, and he opted for... Now, you might think this is probably another good move, but it's not that easy to come up with a move. For example, queen e4, just simply rook f8, rook b8 again. You're gonna have to go into this bishop e6 stuff. If here, for example, your king isn't starting to feel so good, and this can be potential trouble. So he played this and hoped to survive a draw in this position. But he quite easily crumbled. Here he can just straight take, but he opted to play rook g4 check first, and then took, but it doesn't really matter. And now black gives a check. Obviously black is the only one who's playing for a win, and pawns are equal, but even though the white position seems to be all intact together, it's going to be very hard to hold the situation. Check, check, and rook h7. If he kept the rook on h4, maybe, but I don't think having the rook loose is really going to help his position. And suddenly e3 is in the air. So check, king e7, and he's forced to go back and try his best to avoid e3, but e3, and now h5 as well. So he's hoping after e3 he could try and somehow win the pawn, but even that is not going to work. He wants to create a mess at this position. Takes at f5. And if rook takes, the whole point is queen e1. And he didn't really have much of a choice, so he took it anyways. And now black wins a piece, and now this is quite easily winning. Just pick up the last pawn to defend, and then if white just tries to keep the piece there, then the king comes in and defends. So it doesn't really matter. Now white's obviously trying for a fortress, but there is no fortress in this particular situation, because the king can come in, and black will win in a matter of time. Now it looks like he can just keep shuffling, but it's not so much true. So he will intend to bring the king around, which is how white will fall eventually. So he's basically just shuffling here to win the H pawn first. So for example, here will cause some trouble after the move E3. And then the pawns will be lost, all of them, which will result in a winning queen and king versus king and rook. So he has to sacrifice the pawn. Now his last hope is just go back and forth and hope for a draw. But white has to give up, as the king will soon come around, as is shown. And now he has the wonderful queen D3. The point is, after takes, and you cannot stop the queen. And therefore, black has just winning. And that is pretty much the end of the game. And Jan Nepomniachtchi's first win of the 2020-2021 candidates against ANISH GIRI, which started him on his path to victory. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a nice game where it was a very crazy game where both sides had quite a lot of chances, but Jan just pulled through it in the end. And that was the end of the game. So I think it was a pretty topsy-turvy game, and both players had lots of chances. So, thank you for watching the video, and until the next time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you everyone.